The time is 5:14 p.m., September 15th, 1972. A DC-9 plane has just landed at Bulltofta Airport. It was on the way from Gothenburg to Stockholm when 3 armed Croats with connections to the far right hijacked the plane with 86 passengers on board. The passengers and crew were held hostage, and the hijackers demanded that 7 Croats imprisoned in Sweden would be exchanged for the hostages' release. Otherwise, they would blow up the plane. The incident happened in the last year before the airport closed for good. These are the remains of Bulltofta Airport, Sweden's first commercial airport. It was in operation between 1923 and 1972. Nowadays, only remnants is left of this historic site where Sweden's only flight hijacking once took place. Plans to develop Bulltofta Airport began in 1917 and construction was completed in 1923. Service began in 1924 with the routes Malmö-Copenhagen, the world's shortest, and Malmö-Hamburg. During the 1930s, Bulltofta became an important European airport with flights to Great Britain, France, and the Netherlands. This despite the runways remaining unpaved until 1952. After a few hours of deliberation, the Swedish Minister of Justice relented and had the 7 Croatian detainees brought to the plane. The exchange took place by releasing 3 Croats per 30 of the hostages, but the 7th prisoner refused to give up the plane. The hijackers then demanded 1 million kroner in exchange for the remaining passengers, which was reduced to 500,000 kroner. After 16 hours in captivity, the last passengers were able to leave the plane the next morning on September 16th, in exchange for the hijackers receiving a bag containing 500,000 kroner that was left below the plane. However, the crewmen were not allowed to be replaced but were forced to take off at 8:54 to take the hijackers and the freed prisoners to Madrid. During World War II, the airfield served as the base for the Scania wing, whose main task was to intercept German and Allied aircraft violating Swedish airspace. Because of the proximity of Malmö to the German coast, Sweden's declared neutrality, and an agreement between the American Bomber Command and the Swedish government, many heavily damaged Allied bomber aircraft came to land at Bulltofta instead of attempting to make it back to their own airfields in England. These emergency landings occurred mostly during the spring and summer of 1944. When the hijackers and captives arrived in Spain, they requested political asylum. The Spanish investigations showed that they had not had explosives on board. Sweden demanded that the hijackers and prisoners be extradited. But on February 10, 1973, Spain announced that this would not happen. Instead, they would be tried in Spain. In fact, the Spanish dictator Franco released one of the killers to Paraguay, where he became a bodyguard. In that role, he ended up in the United States, where he lived under a different identity, but was captured and handed over to Sweden in 1979. The incident resulted in a new terrorism act. The Swedish Parliament adopted a proposal for a temporary terrorism law on 6 April 1973. Systematic security checks did not exist at the time of the hijacking and were not introduced for domestic flights in Sweden until after September 11, 2001. Rumor has it that there is an abandoned military facility under the park. Some cargo terminals and hangars still remain. 1950s and 1960s saw the arrival of mass tourism and jet aircraft, which Bulltofta Airport was too small to accommodate, and it had become a source of noise pollution for the surrounding area. A new airport was needed further away from Malmö. Sturup Airport opened in 1972. The city has let nature take over where the airport once stood. All that remains are the stories from a bygone era. Over 50 years has passed since the dramatic hijacking. It has left its mark on legislation, but not on nature.